Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. We are back with our part 2 of our recent 3-day.
Yeah, you can see wide open nighttime action with all these nice quality big bluefin hitting the deck. Almost every angler on the boat was bit and had fish going. And if you guys would like an opportunity to catch fish like this, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, where we try to give you guys the best tips possible to try to catch the fish of a lifetime for you.
You can see some highlights of what we're going to be talking about here. We talk about technique, what tackle's been working, the different types of jigs that some of the anglers found success with. That'll be our next video, actually, is kind of looking at this specific case study from this trip of how people looked at, different tackle and how they adjusted. So let's get into it.
Yeah, as you can see, we're in the corner here, and a couple guys working together to try to keep this fish out away from the props. We got the gaff on either side going back and forth. There's multiple fish going right now, even though you can only see the one pictured, and the angler's doing a good job of keeping it circling in the corner, and we eventually get it up and over the rail, and he's got his prize on the boat.
And you can see, kind of zooming into the jig here, they're really liking these smaller profile jigs, as we sort of mentioned in our last video as well. Definitely the 300 gram SKs and rip rollers dominated this night bite.
Yeah, I don't think the color was very important. You can see the pink and blue Katy Perry that was on deck for that last fish. But if you were in the right zone, it didn't matter. We've talked about that before, that color doesn't really matter as much as getting the right jig to get right in the zone and being in front of the fish to have a chance to get bit.
Yeah, exactly. And this you're helping out this angler right here. Like I said, it was a really intense night bite. Kind of all night we were catching fish pretty consistently, so a lot of people kind of tapped out. A lot of people were tag teaming these big fish.
Yeah, and there's no shame in tag teaming a big fish, even with a rail rod. These are 100+ pound fish, all these ones that you're seeing on deck right now, and they're putting up a heck of a fight. They're tough fish, and even if you have the right equipment, if you have a big rail rod, a nice 2-speed reel, heavy line, and big assist hooks, it could take you a while.
And you can see Ted brought his fish up here, and he used assist hooks on the top and the bottom. So if we zoom in a little bit here, you can see that both hooks were used. So the fish was coming up just a little bit slower than if it were hooked only on one part of the jig.
Right, which is probably why he needed my assistance towards the end there. It takes longer. A lot of times when that happens, you're pulling it sideways. You can't ever fully turn its head. That's why I fish my lures personally with just hooks on the bottom or just hooks on the top. There's a lot of boats that'll tell you that. Some boats will only allow you to fish one side or the other also, because the top hooks can swing and catch a deckhand if they're not in the fish as they're lifting your fish over the rail. So it's better practice, in my opinion, just one side or the other of the lure, and you'll be able to catch your fish.
And we have my dad here, highlights MVP of the video in my opinion. This was his first big fish. He was kind of learning about the technique, and it was dragging him up and over the anchor. Especially at night, it's really difficult. You can even see on the camera here, it's really difficult to get around the anchor sometimes with how hard these big fish are pulling. We got another angler on a big fish too, so the deckhands are stepping in and helping kind of maneuver around the boat there. That's what they're there to do. They're there to help. They're there to make sure that you're able to move around the boat and get in the proper positioning when you can.
Yeah, so you can see the two fish that were going there, and they passed the rod underneath the other fish. The fish had circled under him, so it's always good to communicate over and under so you don't wrap each other's fish. And there's a lot of movement. You don't get to just stay in one place too often for these fish. You have to move your feet. You have to follow the fish. Otherwise, two lines are going to wrap, and eventually that friction is going to cut off one of the two fish.
And here's Captain Frank kind of checking the drag for us here. That's always super important too as you're going through the fight, especially in these longer fights. It's not that, your drag wasn't tight enough in the beginning, but it can loosen up over time. So it's always good, just mention to the deckhand that's there, be like, hey, do you mind just checking my drag? It's been a minute since I've been fighting this fish, and I'm not really gaining on it.
Yeah, those gears can heat up, and the drag can loosen up slightly, and it can extend your fight significantly. And sometimes if the fight goes too long, it might cost you the fish, because the longer that fish is in the water, the longer we're under tension, the more chance that something's going to go wrong.
Yep, exactly. And right here talking about my dad wasn't really able to gain much on the fish at this point, and so Frank kind of gave him a tip to, stand up and really try to turn the head of that fish. I feel like that's something that we forget about is, when you're not really able to gain and you want to be in that fighting stance, but at the same time you have to kind of know when to sort of lift and really try to get that fish swimming back at the boat.
Yeah, these rail rods make it a lot easier. But when he's way scoped out like that, you might have to stand up and lift and turn its head for a little bit until you can get it more vertical up and down, and then you can use the rail rod more effectively or efficiently. And you can see this fish gave such a good fight. It was hooked late in the night. You can see gray light already as the sun's getting ready to come up.
Yeah, so we hooked it around like 4:30 in the morning, and we're fighting it for I think about an hour, and here it's finally coming up to gaff. We got all the gaffs ready to make sure that my dad gets his fish.
Yeah, last fish of the stop here. Like Kat mentioned earlier in the video, we were catching fish all night for this night bite. It started around 9:30 p.m. and fish bit all the way until the gray, as you can see here, as we throw our last fish on of the night for this night bite, capping off an epic night bite. But there's more action to come here, so stay with us, guys.
Yeah, this one, it was a PB for my dad. That was awesome. It ended up weighing in gill and gutted about 140, 150. He's stoked, and it's kind of interesting. You can see how this fish was hooked. It was almost hooked in the nose, kind of like a septum piercing almost with this SK.
Yeah, which probably made it feel a little bit strange with the head shakes and stuff like that, since it was never on one side or the other. We can see Chewy here, and he's on more of a slow pitch style setup. Shorter rod, less of a backbone, heavy drag on the reel, where you're not so much using the rail as a fulcrum and you're not using the rod to lift. It's more you that's doing all the lifting, and you're depending on the heavy drag on the reel to gain line. And you can see he's doing a good job keeping pressure on the fish and trying to gain and gain and gain, but he's not able to use the rail in the same way that we are with our rail rods that we prefer to use for I guess fishing smarter instead of harder. But the slow pitch setups are a lot of fun. Guys enjoy them a lot. It's a different feel. They're more sensitive, so you can feel more with the jig in the water. Some people say that you get more bites because you don't miss some of them because of the sensitivity in the rod, versus our bigger, heavier setups where you might miss something because you didn't feel it. But in my opinion, it pays off because I'd rather be able to use the rail like Chewy has to here, even on his slow pitch setup.
Yeah, that's something that's such a great distinction. It's like where the emphasis where you're fighting the fish, right? And fighting it with the reel, and the drag that's applied there versus the rod. I think that's something that, we understand, but I think just like making that super clear is, something that's good to distinguish.
Yeah, you can see two fish coming together here in the corner. There's a third line that's in here that had a little bit of slack line that wrapped up, so the deckhand's spinning that around, trying to unwrap it before the two fish get stitched together, and they're going to try their best to get that figured out and get the line off to get the fish in.
Yeah, and something too, some guys get sort of like paralysis a little bit when they see that their line is wrapped. I always say just try one, right? If we can't quite see where it is, just try one way, and in a couple of turns, if it's not coming undone, go the other way. It's better to take action than just kind of stare at it. If it's a little confusing, especially if it's at night, it's hard to see. Maybe you have some darker spectra. Just try to take some action on and getting that undone.
And you can see on deck in the background there, the guys are gill and gutting the fish after bleeding them and spiking them on deck. So these fish that have already hit the deck, they're going to get spiked right away so that the fish is a little bit safer to get the lure out of. It kills it quicker. And then they're going to cut the gills to bleed the fish. And then after a few minutes, they're going to come back and they're going to cut the gills and the guts out of the fish. They're not going to throw them overboard, though, because we don't want to spook off the school, not until we leave from the bite. And you can see there's a bunch of fish going down the side here, and we're trying to coordinate and space ourselves from each other, so when the fish goes one way, I'm walking up with it to try to space out from the other one that's at gaff as well.
Yep, and you can see all these fish are kind of going under the boat here too, so it's really crucial right in that position to have your rod tip down. Make sure that you're able to kind of lift that fish from underneath the boat. That's a little more back intense intensive, right? A little bit harder because you can't use the rail as good, but you know, you're doing that right there, right? You can see yourself, you're lift and lift and lift and trying to get it out from under the boat.
Yeah, exactly. Looks like we're at the stern here, so when the fish is angled under the boat, I'm reaching down as low as I can to get the tip as low to the water as I can to increase the angle so we don't wrap the props or rudder. We've talked about that a lot on the channel, but it's very, very important. You can see another nice fish hitting the deck next to these other ones that have already made their way on the boat. And that's another small profile jig that helped land that fish.
I believe it's a BFT.
Is it? That was the BFT. It's almost like an eddy bomb for those of you guys that don't know. Built like a sinker to get down there. Heavy, small lure. So those were working really well on this trip, smaller profile lures, and we talked about that in our previous video, including the new hot lure, the tungsten lures. So if you guys haven't checked that out, please do.
And you can see another example here. This is Edwin's fish. He also uses assist hooks on the top and on the bottom. So, you know, getting that over the rail, getting that up to the surface, again, just poses an extra little challenge. But at the same time, right, it does cover surface area. The counter argument to that is, you know, there's no part of the jig that the fish would bite that it wouldn't get hooked. So, you know, there's kind of two schools of thought there. But we have a stoked angler there. He is super excited. I think we had a lot of PBs on this trip.
You can see terminal tackle right here. That hook that I was showing is pretty much straightened out. And then we had so much pressure on this lure that it almost broke where it's through wired. But luckily, Mustad makes a good, strong product. Other than their hooks, you have to change out the assist hooks like I was showing. Even those upgrade assist hooks can straighten out when you start putting that much drag on a fish. So make sure when you guys buy your lures, you buy some assist hooks to put on there that are nice and strong. Replace those to give you the best chance to land a big fish.
And we got another angler here. He is doing a great job trying to use the rail. We got another one coming down from the bow. Ted's on another fish here, and it just came up super quick in the rest of the way, and so we're trying to get a gaff in it. Unfortunately, it was a little far and ended up taking another run.
Yeah, it's a hairy moment when a fish is coming up right by another fish that's at color. Really, really crucial moments there, and the guys did a good job following the fish down and communicating with each other. You can see down the stern another line in the water, another fish at color. So these guys have to talk. The deckhands are trying to stagger out and space between them. You can see these lines are coming together right here, very, very close to wrapping each other, but they didn't quite wrap. And that's great work by the passengers and the crew, figuring out if the fish were going to cross paths or not. And they're going to have to watch it again as the fish circles again and just keep communicating with each other.
Yep, exactly. And so talk a little bit about, you know, you can see Keegan sort of helping bring in the line with that guy in the neon shirt there. Talk a little bit about sort of, you know, how that helps.
It's kind of your wicked tuna style. I don't care for it personally. It's adding a little bit extra drag. Is really all it's doing, where he's pulling when the fish's head has gotten turned by the rod. So he's gaining every single inch with that 2-speed reel. Some guys like it. It gets the fish in faster. It adds a little bit more drag. Personally, I'd rather just check my reel again and make sure that my drag's good. You can see Rob handed the reel over to Keegan for a second for him to try to turn the head of the fish because it was circling under the boat so far. And I believe Keegan did turn up the drag a little bit, and he kind of gets the fish more in control here, doing circles where the head is turned and coming back up before handing the rod back over to Rob.
And really, that's just the perfect angle right there, because sometimes, you know, with this big fish, you can barely get half a crank on them, and so being able to just really use that like fulcrum point, you know, with the rod, be able to gain a little bit. Also, personally too, like I like having the rod under my elbow when I can, just because it makes me a little bit more mobile. Just like when another passenger, right, is fighting a fish and you're moving over, moving under, I can just move and stand up a little bit faster.
Yeah, in the armpit is kind of the way to go once you get it to up and down position. A lot of fighting belts and guys are used to tucking it into their hip, groin area where they're pulling on the fish, and that works just fine when the fish is way out and has a lot of angle away from the boat. But when they're to the point where they're up and down, if you have a heavy stout rod like this, in your armpit's going to work a lot better. And like you said, you're going to be more mobile. You're going to be able to move around somebody, past the rod, whatever you need to do.
You can see all these different jigs here being, hooked in to the tuna's mouth. I mean, they were swallowing these things. They were having a great time just having some fun on the boat here, man. It was an epic bite.
Yeah, that was like a 400-gram rip roller, I believe, that we saw last, and you can see completely different colors than the ones that we saw earlier in the video. So like I had mentioned, I don't think color is as big of a deal as a lot of people put an emphasis on. It's about having the right lure for the right conditions. You can see this one, full extension. We reach out and get it after a long fight and lift that fish up and over. And another beautiful fish hitting the deck for us, and it was a heck of a bite.
Yeah, that was definitely a PB for him as well. We'll kind of be going over again what jigs specifically that these fishermen were using in our next video, and kind of how they adjusted to the bite. I know for myself, I actually switched the jig that I initially started off with. I wasn't getting bit, and I think it was just because of the profile of the jig and just the heaviness of it. I wasn't quite fishing heavy enough. I feel like people were getting bit before I was even down to the zone. So I kind of made that adjustment, and then once I made that adjustment, I got bit like the next stop. So I was pretty stoked on that.
You can see these two anglers, their fish are out far from the boat, so their rods are tucked in by their groin area basically, or by their hip, whatever you want to say, and they're holding the rods up high, trying to get to like that 90-degree area from reel to the tip of the rod, and that's having good pressure on the fish when it's out like that.
And something happened here to where we had to splice that one that Joe was fighting. I
think it got in the rudder or the prop, and then we had to go to the other side of the boat and snag the line, and I have it in my hands right now, and we're trying to wait until the fish is a little bit under control, not shaking its head, not running. So I'm not gaining line from him, he's not gaining line from me when we're at a little bit of a stalemate. If that happens, it feels like forever when it's in my hands. Once that moment happens, we're going to cut the line on both sides and tie it back on. And
see, you're actually gaining on this fish, and just wait till you see the fish that is landed that you are hand lining in, gaining quite a little bit of line. Yeah. And they were finally able to add it, connect it onto that rod and reel, so able to let go and get the fish going.
Yeah, he was actually swimming towards the boat there, so I was just I wasn't pulling, I would say. I was just keeping enough to keep it tight. And we got the splice back in the water, back in the reel, and then you can see this is the fish right here that we spliced off.
Coming up hot still, man, look at that.
yeah, so the splice worked out, we were able to get it in and get the fish in, and high fives all around.
Like I said, this was just a trip full of PBs. And if you haven't checked out our part 1 video, we do go over the daytime bite. It was also super epic. And if you want to increase your chances of landing your PB, don't forget to subscribe here.